You know that feeling when you meet someone and you just click? That's what Gay BFF app is all about. It's a new app just for making friends, not dates. Actual friends in the LGBTQ plus community. Whether you just moved to a new city or you're looking to expand your circle of friends or you just want more queer friends in your life, Gay BFF makes it easy to connect with people who get you. Everyone on the app is also verified, so no AI, no bots, no fake conversations. Sign up today at gaybff.app, currently available in web browser or in the Apple Store. Hi, thanks for joining me on the Listen Up Girl podcast. This is your daily LGBTQ plus news podcast. I'm your host, Zach Friedman. Today is Thursday, August 27th, and we've got 7 stories. A fight over queer history happening quietly inside the federal government, a court win for trans health care, a harassment case that actually led to real consequences, a police officer's discrimination allegations against his own department, a viral movement involving a protester and superhero costume, a decision by several directors to walk away from the biggest franchises in entertainment, and a goodbye to an icon. So let's get into it, starting with the Smithsonian curator refuses to let queer history be erased. So we're starting with a story what's happening inside the federal institutions right now, largely out of public view. Katherine Ott has been a curator at the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History for more than 20 years, working in the Division of Medicine and Science. Over that career, she built and curated expositions on the history of disability, HIV and AIDS, and LGBTQ plus history, including Illegal to Be You, Gay History Beyond Stonewall, an exhibition marking the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall Uprising. Now she's publicly speaking about ongoing pressure within this administration to remove or alter LGBTQ content from federal collections. As a civil servant, she says she took an oath to uphold the Constitution, and to her, that oath means preserving the historical record accurately and not rewriting it to satisfy whoever happens to be in charge at the moment. Here's why that matters beyond one curator's story. When we talk about attempts to erase queer history, it's easy to picture that something abstract, a culture war talking point, a headline, but it plays out very concretely, object by object, exhibit by exhibit label, inside institutions that most Americans trust to tell them the truth about the past. Katherine Ott has spent decades building the case, literally, that LGBTQ history is American history. Whether that case stays intact over the next few years may come down to people like her simply refusing to let it be dismantled quietly. Thank you, Katherine Ott, for being such an amazing ally and an amazing person. Next, a federal judge blocks attempt to strip gender-affirming care coverage. So a real legal win, and the one that has immediate practical consequences for a lot of people. A federal judge has blocked an attempt by the current administration to remove gender-affirming care as a covered benefit under the Affordable Care Act. The rule being challenged would have allowed insurers to exclude gender-affirming care from marketplace and employer-based plans entirely, treating it as an optional benefit rather than a medically necessary care that every major U.S. medical association recognizes it as. For context, this fits as a broader pattern this year. Multiple attempts through multiple federal agencies to chip away at coverage for trans health care without passing new legislation, using regulatory rule changes instead, which move faster and get far less public attention than a bill working through Congress. This is at least the second such rule a federal court has blocked in recent months. The judge's ruling keeps coverage in place while the underlying legal challenges continues. It's not a permanent resolution. An appeal is likely, and similar rules could resurface in different form. But procedurally, this matters enormously for real people making real healthcare decisions right now, not hypothetically months or years from now while litigation drags on. Coverage would have lapsed, stays intact today. That's a genuine win, even with more fighting still ahead. Our next story is accountability for online harassment. So here's a story about consequences, which we don't get to report on nearly enough on this show. A 67-year-old woman is facing legal consequences after sending a trans woman a series of threatening, hateful messages. The messages were reported to local law enforcement, who pursued the case rather than treating it as a private dispute unworthy of formal action. The sheriff's office involved made a public statement condemning the woman's conduct directly, telling her on the record that harassment had no place in society and she was right to feel shame over what she had done. The direct public condemnation is the part worth sitting with. Online harassment against trans people is chronologically underreported. Even when it is reported, it has historically been treated by a lot of departments as a low priority, something to log, not something to actually pursue. A case where law enforcement followed through on an investigation, where the officer in charge was willing to publicly and unambiguously say this behavior is unacceptable, sets a precedence that matters more than a single case might suggest. It tells other people sending messages just like these ones that somebody might actually be paying attention and there's an actual cost to doing this. Good. I'm so glad that they called that lady, and thank you to the police department and that officer for actually acknowledging this and making it known. Next, a gay police officer alleges retaliation for reporting harassment. So staying with law enforcement, but on the other side of the badge this time, a gay police officer has filed a formal complaint alleging that he was suspended after documenting years of harassment by a supervisor within his own department. According to his complaint, the harassment was sustained and ongoing over an extended period. When he began formally documenting incidents, building the kind of a paper trail that advocates and employment lawyers generally recommend in exactly the situation, his department response wasn't to investigate the supervisor he was reporting, it was to suspend him. He has said publicly that the experience left him with significant and lasting psychological harm, and that he felt he had no real internal channel to raise the issue without retaliation. It is unfortunately a familiar pattern in the workplace discrimination cases generally, but not just in law enforcement. The person who documents and reports the problem often ends up facing more consequences than the person the complaint was actually about. His case is now moving forward, and this one is worth tracking closely. How it resolves will say a lot about whether the police departments are actually willing to protect officers who report this type of treatment from within their own ranks, or whether the primary move to protect the institution and the people already inside it. Our next story is Spider-Man punches an anti-LGBTQ plus protester. We need to shift in tone here, and this story provides it. Video is circulating of a man in a full Spider-Man costume punching an anti-LGBTQ plus protester in the face after the protester stood in public holding a sign that displayed a racial slur. The footage has already been widely shared across social platforms over the past day, racking up views well into the millions. To be responsible about it, this isn't a story about violence being the correct or recommended response to a bigotry in public spaces, and that's genuinely not a takeaway here. But it's not hard to understand why a moment like this spreads the way it did. There's something about cartoonishly satisfying about a costumed stranger, someone dressed of all things as a superhero, deciding on the spot that a slur displayed on public wasn't going to go unanswered. It's a small chaotic story in the scheme of everything else in today's episode, but it clearly struck a nerve with a lot of people, and honestly, that's understandable. So thanks, Spider-Man, for sticking up for our community. Next, queer directors decline to work with HBO's Harry Potter. So an entertainment story with some of the real substance underneath it. Multiple queer directors have reportedly turned down opportunities to work on the upcoming HBO Harry Potter series, specifically citing J.K. Rowling's continued anti-trans public activism as their stated reason for declining. Rowling remains as executive producer on the project with direct creative involvement in how it gets made, not just a name attached for royalties, but someone who actively is shaping the story. For these directors, that level of involvement has reportedly been enough to walk away from a high-profile job on one of the largest entertainment franchises in the world. It's a meaningful signal, even if it's an imperfect one, and hasn't been accompanied by public statements or open letters in most cases. These are directors quietly declining work, with the reasoning surfacing through industry reporting rather than a coordinated campaign. Whether this translates into any real pressure on the studio remains an open question. Franchises this large have absorbed plenty of controversy before without changing creative direction or personnel, but it does mean inside the industry itself, this isn't being treated as a non-issue by the people being asked to actually make the show, whatever HBO ultimately decides to do about it. And we will see whatever HBO ultimately decides to do about working with somebody that's transphobic like J.K. Rowling. Now, today we close with a loss. Tim Curry dies at the age of 80. Tim Curry died at his home in Los Angeles, California, according to his longtime manager. He has dealt with serious health issues for more than a decade following a severe stroke in 2012 that took the use of his legs and shifted most of his later career to voice work. For a lot of queer audiences, Curry is inseparable from one role in particular. Dr. Frankenfurter, the Rocky Horror Picture Show, the sweet transvestite from transsexual Transylvania, who turned a modestly received 1975 film into one of the most enduring midnight movie phenomena in cinema history. Curry originated the role on the London stage in 1973 in the original production of the Rocky Horror Show. Before reprising it on screen, playing it with a fearless and a total lack of self-conscious that a lot of queer performers and audience have pointed to for 50 years as genuinely groundbreaking, decades before mainstream media had any real vocabulary for gender play on screen. He never confirmed himself to be one role, either a daytime Emmy, Tony, or Oliver nominations, and a career that ran from Clue to its countless voice roles, but Frankenfurter is the legacy that mattered the most here, and it's worth saying plainly, the performance gave a lot of people, including a lot of queer kids who had absolutely nowhere to see themselves, permission to be unapologetically campy, strange, and fabulous decades before it was safe to do in any of these things in public. So rest in peace and rest in power, Tim Curry. He was amazingly talented. So that's your 7 stories for today. A curator protecting our history from inside, a court ruling that kept healthcare coverage intact, a harassment case that actually resulted in real consequences, an officer fighting his own department for the right to report what happened to him, a viral moment that gave a lot of people something to laugh about, an entertainment industry drawing quietly in the line of most people won't see reported anywhere else, and a goodbye to a performer who gave a lot of us permission to do exactly and to be exactly who we are. If this show was useful to you, subscribe wherever you're listening, share it with somebody who needs to hear today's news, and just take a few minutes and leave the show a rating on whatever podcast platform or video platform you're watching this on. I'll be back tomorrow with more LGBTQ plus news. Thank you for listening to the Listen Up Girl podcast.